Predominantly. For the most part, or mainly. Predominantly Muslim. Predominantly white. Predominantly black. Predominantly Christian. This type of virus predominantly affects middle-aged or elderly females. Analogy. A comparison between one thing with another. Make an analogy. Draw an analogy. A useful analogy. A false analogy. The scientist drew an analogy between the brain and a vast computer. Coherent. Logical and well-organized, easy to understand. A coherent strategy. A coherent policy. A coherent plan. A coherent approach. The leader outlined a coherent plan for reducing the budget without cutting services. Aesthetic. Relating to art or beauty. Aesthetic beauty. Aesthetic appeal. Aesthetic response. Aesthetic judgment. The aesthetic judgment is more powerful than the historical one. Discrimination. Distinguishing between two or more people or things. Age discrimination. Job discrimination. Class discrimination. Racial discrimination. People from ethnic minorities every so often faces prejudice and discrimination. Momentum. Speed of an object in motion. Gain a momentum. Maintain a momentum. Keep momentum. Lose momentum. The advertising campaign has been gaining momentum ever since the media appeal. Coincidence. When two things happen at the same time. A happy coincidence. A strange coincidence. A creepy coincidence. A fortunate coincidence. There is no such thing as a coincidence in this world, there is only the inevitable. Dysfunction. Not operating normally or properly. Family dysfunction. Sexual dysfunction. Erectile dysfunction. Muscle dysfunction. Educators say schools have been overwhelmed by the age of dysfunction. Pollination. Transfer the pollen from one plant to another. Pollination of crops. Pollination of flowers. Pollination by bees. Pollination by insects. For a plant or flower to produce seeds, pollination must occur between two flowers. Abuse. The improper use of something. Abuse of alcohol. Abuse of drugs. Abuse of authority. Abuse of power. The greater the power, the more dangerous the abuse. Consequence. A result of an action or situation. Global consequences. Devastating consequences. Deadly consequences. Potential consequence. The accident was the inevitable consequence of carelessness. Assurance. A positive promise or pledge. An assurance of safety. An assurance of security. An assurance of support. An assurance of loyalty. They gave an assurance that the work would be completed before the deadline. Aggravate. To make a bad situation worse. Aggravate a situation. Aggravate an injury. Aggravating circumstances. Aggravating factors. Cutting down a large scale of old forests may aggravate global warming. Catastrophe. A sudden and widespread disaster. A humanitarian catastrophe. An environmental catastrophe. An economic catastrophe. An imminent catastrophe. Drastic changes are needed if environmental catastrophe is to be avoided. Breed. To produce by sexual reproduction. A rare breed. An exotic breed. An endangered breed. A successful breed. This botanical garden now attracts over 50 species of breeding birds. Deduction. The act or process of deducting. A deduction from salary. A deduction from expenses. A deduction from income. A deduction from interest. The farm arrived at the budget solution through a simple process of deduction. Intelligence. Ability to understand and think about things. Military intelligence. Foreign intelligence. Strategic intelligence. Tactical intelligence. To be good at communication, you need a reasonable level of intelligence. Outbreak. A time when something suddenly begins. Disease outbreak. Devastating outbreak. Measles outbreak. Sporadic outbreaks. The recent outbreak of racial violence in the area is very disturbing. Conclusive. Showing that something is certainly true. Conclusive evidence. Conclusive proof. Conclusive results. Conclusive decision. Laboratory tests gave conclusive proof that the meat presents a high risk to human health. Symptoms. Subjective indication of a disorder or disease. Flu symptoms. Withdrawal symptoms. Allergic symptoms. Psychotic symptoms. The symptoms of depression can include poor appetite and weight loss. Profound. Having intellectual depth and insight. A profound impact. A profound effect. A profound influence. A profound implication. Psychology offers profound insights into the true nature of human. Response. A reaction to a question or experience. Disaster response. Emergency response. Appropriate response. Immediate response. We wish the government would be more attentive to detail in their response. Discourse. Written or spoken communication or debate. A political discourse. A philosophical discourse. A science discourse. A feminist discourse. Reading makes a full man, meditation a profound man, discourse a clear man. Excavate. To dig a hole in the ground. Excavate a site. Excavate a fossil. Excavate a grave. Excavate a skeleton. Archaeologists excavated the sites carefully and record everything they see and find. Facilitate. To make something possible or easier. Facilitate dialogue. Facilitate cooperation. Facilitate integration. Facilitate access. The new trade agreement should facilitate more rapid economic growth. Domestic. Relating to the home and the household. Domestic affairs. Domestic dispute. Domestic flights. Domestic violence. The company hopes to attract both foreign and domestic investors. Deterioration. The process of becoming progressively worse. Rapid deterioration. Significant deterioration. Physical deterioration. Psychological deterioration. Mental and physical deterioration both occur naturally with age. Anticipate. Think that something will probably happen. Anticipate a decline. Anticipate a slowdown. Anticipate a reaction. Anticipate a catastrophe. A good speaker is able to anticipate an audience's needs and concerns. Comprehend. To understand something completely. Comprehend the importance. Comprehend the meaning. Comprehend the implications. Comprehend the algorithms. It is difficult to comprehend the sheer scale of the suffering caused by the war. Landmark. A building or place that is easily recognized. A historic landmark. A famous landmark. An architectural landmark. A local landmark. The invention of the silicon chip was a landmark in the history of the computer technology. Fauna. The animals of a particular area. Marine fauna. Diverse fauna. Native fauna. Local fauna. The forest's fauna is safeguarded by local wildlife protection laws. Fraudulent. Intended to deceive people. A fraudulent scheme. A fraudulent transaction. A fraudulent claim. A fraudulent email. It is thought that fraudulent actions revolve around the insurance sectors. Human rights. Rights inherent to all human beings. Human rights abuses. Human rights activists. Human rights groups. Human rights violations. Human rights groups have called for an independent inquiry into the killings. Humanitarian. Promoting human welfare and social reform. Humanitarian aid. Humanitarian crisis. Humanitarian relief. Humanitarian effort. The aftermath of the catastrophe could require a massive humanitarian relief operation. Attempt. An act of trying to do something. Rescue attempt. Suicide attempt. Repeated attempt. Second attempt. The speech was a deliberate attempt to embarrass the president. Reinforce. To make something stronger. Reinforce a perception. Reinforce a notion. Reinforce a belief. Reinforce a stereotype. Housing policy operates at present to reinforce the nuclear family. Hostile. Unfriendly and ready to argue or fight. A hostile environment. A hostile climate. A hostile atmosphere. A hostile circumstance. The world's trading environment is likely to become increasingly hostile. Paternal. Pertaining to one's father and his genes. Paternal pride. Paternal affection. Paternal instinct. Paternal devotion. Through DNA analysis, we can figure out the information about paternal ancestors. Niche. A small domain of a market. A market niche. A profitable niche. A lucrative niche. A product niche. Small companies can do extremely well if they can select a specific market niche. Juvenile. Young person who is not yet an adult. Juvenile delinquency. Juvenile detention. Juvenile facility. Juvenile violence. Nowadays societies have been witnessing a great deal of juvenile delinquency. Biological. Relating to biology or living organisms. Biological agent. Biological parents. Biological weapons. Biological warfare. Breathing and sleeping are examples of biological rhythms in humans. Pathology. The scientific study of disease. Forensic pathology. Molecular pathology. A pathology department. A pathology report. Pathology helps us to know the nature and origin of a disease scientifically.